You're watching me, loading up to take a ride with this guy, a stranger who hasn't been vetted or hasn't passed a background check, to pick me up, drop me off, and ultimately take my money. Dumb on my part, right? Let's back up. Turns out he's part of a black market gaining speed across Florida.
Let's do cash rides, Florida.
Thanks to social media, where so-called cash rides are actual public pages on Facebook, connecting desperate riders with available drivers. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for cash.
I was just shocked that this is so unregulated.
That's our whistleblower, Victoria Gunbranson. We met her this summer when she was an approved Lyft driver. She told us she first heard about these unapproved cash cabs months prior.
Are these stealing business from you?
No, I don't think so.
So what's the big deal with them?
It's the consumer safety. We go through a background check. We go through all these extra protections. You don't know if the person you're getting into has a criminal record, is a registered sex offender. You don't know this.
So we did some digging to find out and found some drivers soliciting rides for cash had histories riddled with traffic violations, red light running. Others we found had criminal arrests for assault, battery, and this guy who made sure to advertise his marijuana-friendly ride neglected to let potential customers know he's been pulled over so many times he can't legally drive. That's right, the state revoked his driver's license years ago.
Scary.
Chris Black is an insurance guy who can only count the ways this cottage industry is all wrong.
If you are in that vehicle and you are injured, who's going to pay for my damages? Who's going to pay for my medical bills? Definitely a high risk, absolutely.
For who?
For the passenger, for the drivers, for everyone else that are on the roadways.
As for my cash cabbie, we checked his background and clean driving record before setting up our 12-mile ride, which cost me $18. Oh, and in case you're wondering why he doesn't just drive for a legitimate rideshare program like Lyft or Uber, he wouldn't talk to us on camera, but tells me his car would not meet the requirements.
It's all corrupt, and that's what makes me pissed off.
James Vasallo
I keep on going here.
won't stop fighting.
They are not for the elderly people that they're supposed to be guarding. They are just about their pocketbooks.
Especially when the battle
I keep on going.
is over his dad.
I can't talk about that. I miss him.
In 2014, a sibling squabble over missing money led Vasallo to hire a professional guardian to care for his aging father and protect his dad's money.
Sounded absolutely perfect.
But instead, Vasallo says his father's guardian took control of the money and went out of control spending it, from costly fees to outside hires.
Each one of them is sending bills, no less than $15,000 every bill they sent.
So she hired 4 lawyers that your father paid for?
Paid for. They do separate things, she said.
Professional guardians are court-appointed caretakers who manage the lives of those a judge deems are unable to care for themselves. And it's a growing business. Today, Florida has 551 registered professional guardians, up more than 120% from a decade ago. But for a state program that grants strangers so much control and power, we found so little oversight.
They're multi-million-dollar businesses.
Dr. Sam Sugar is co-founder of Americans Against Abusive Probate Guardianship.
It's all about the money, baby.
The state doesn't limit how many people guardians oversee, and courts only set guidelines for how much guardians can charge. We found fees ranging from $45 an hour in Hillsborough County to $95 an hour in Palm Beach County.
It's an illogical system, and it's designed to benefit the court insiders far more than the best interests of the ward.
In 2 decades, Palm Beach County found at least $5 million in unsubstantiated expenditures and missing assets in guardianship cases. Pinellas County uncovered at least $22 million in questionable guardian spending. Still, it's a booming Florida industry. No degree required, just a 40-hour class, 1 test, a criminal background, and credit check. But even when those checks show red, we found some guardians still getting the green light.
Listen to me.
Like Kathy Johnson in Collier County, seen here in this online video taken by a frustrated client.
This whole guardianship is fraudulent.
According to the state, Johnson is a registered professional guardian despite 2 DUI convictions more than a decade ago, which she neglected to disclose, and a 1992 personal bankruptcy she and her husband filed, both not disqualifiers according to the state. Johnson told us by phone she wasn't interested in commenting, but would have her attorney reach out.
If you have a multi-million-dollar estate, should you be comfortable with somebody managing it who's been bankrupt personally? It doesn't make any sense.
It's the most rottenest, the most corrupt thing I've ever seen in my life.
Albert Vasallo died in 2016, 2 years after professional guardian Elizabeth Savitt took over. Last year, Palm Beach County stopped assigning Savitt new cases after she and her husband, a former Palm Beach County judge, made headlines accused of using their relationship to pad their pockets in court-appointed guardianship cases. While no criminal wrongdoing was found, a county inspector general later concluded Savitt was involved with corruption and collusion of judges and lawyers in several of her cases and now faces becoming the first professional guardian to be kicked out of the state's program.
James, do you feel like you'll ever be able to let this go?
No.
As for James Vasallo, he tried to fight his dad's guardian in court, but a judge ultimately ruled against him. James remains angry at the system.
It's sort of like the Old West, you know?
No. The Wild Wild West was pretty tame compared to this.
There are things you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones. Have advance directives and make sure it's bulletproof. Put in writing that you don't want a guardian under any circumstances, and name about a dozen people who can assume that position. For more tips and how to report problems, head to our website.
Since the Parkland shooting,
Primary concern is the safety of the students.
student threats against schools have led to press conferences
There's going to be zero tolerance.
and headlines.
2 girls armed with knives.
But we found far more frequent are the threats you don't hear about,
Do you regret making that comment?
but land kids in Florida courtrooms like this one.
Anytime they hear this at school, they're going to react to it.
Thank you for being here, sir.
This one.
I'm concerned with this obsession and fascination you have with guns.
And this one.
Do you have any firearms?
In fact, the number of cases involving kids who threaten to shoot and kill has taken even the most seasoned judges off guard.
The cases that come before us will shock you.
According to the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, last year 779 kids were criminally charged with school threat-related offenses, a nearly 25% increase from 3 years earlier.
Using court documents filed under Florida's red flag law, we found kids threatening to shoot and kill other students, teachers, and schools. One 14-year-old Pinellas boy asked a friend while on school grounds after hours, "Who should I start killing first? The blacks, the whites, or the Hispanics?" The boy was also Baker acted. In St. Lucie County, police said a student was overheard telling a classmate he had a list of students he wanted to kill. "If you want to live, don't come to school next week." The 14-year-old claimed he was only joking. He also didn't have a gun. In the end, in most student threat cases we reviewed, police determined there were no guns.
The sheriff's department has already told me that you have no firearms.
Same with these 14-year-old Central Florida students who this summer were arrested and charged after daring each other to put a school shooting note they found in a neighbor's mailbox.
Have you ever possessed a gun?
And this 17-year-old who appeared in court a few weeks ago after his teacher said he was flipping the bird in front of a mirror. When she told him to stop, he allegedly said, "I'll fill your body with bullets."
Did you think for a second this might get me in trouble?
The student claimed he was singing a song. His mom, who we're not identifying to protect her son, agrees with the punishment, a 12-month gun ban.
That's a good thing. I'm not mad.
You got to follow the rules.
Across the state, judges aren't taking any chances.
There's zero tolerance. These threats have to be taken seriously.
Zero tolerance does not prevent shootings.
Dr. Dewey Cornell, a forensic clinical psychologist and education professor at the University of Virginia, argues zero-tolerance policies don't work for kids.
There's a lot of concern in the threat assessment community that zero tolerance can actually escalate a problem, escalate a conflict.
Instead, Dr. Cornell, whose own threat assessment guidelines are now being used by thousands of schools across at least 30 states, including right here in Florida, advises schools and police respond to kids who make threats less with court action and more with counseling.
In a very small number of cases, less than 1% of cases, do we need to arrest and take legal action against children for making threats.
But in a state still raw from its deadliest school shooting in recent history, decoding if a student's threat is real remains a challenge we're all still figuring out.
We've got kids that want to try to emulate a mass shooter. You know, what are we supposed to do with that? And then you go and they find out they don't have a firearm. But what if they did?
I have the tanks to take with me when I go somewhere.
58-year-old Deborah Bouchard has enough to worry about.
All the time, 24/7.
Then her personal medical history landing in the wrong hands.
I don't want my information out there with just anyone.
But across the country, data breaches are on the rise, and Florida isn't immune, ranking among states with the most hacks over the last decade. More than 350 million records exposed. And in the criminal world of cybersecurity, medical is big money, having the most reported data breaches over the past 3 years, according to a nonprofit organization which tracks government-reported breaches.
Correct. It's the single largest source of identity theft.
Dr. Jay Wolfson, a health law and policy expert at the University of South Florida, explains why.
They don't care about your health conditions. They care about the data points that will allow them to get into your banking system, to get into your real estate system, to get into your mortgage system, and do the real identity theft stuff.
So it's the key to the treasure box.
It's the key to the treasure box.
A treasure box experts warn will be more vulnerable as more medical records go digital.
It's super easy. And cheap.
Which is where this guy comes in.
10-year-old can get access to this.
He's a security expert for KnowBe4, an IT security firm.
With this information, you can build a perfect replica of someone's life.
He works undercover, so we're keeping him there.
This was a hack that was happening in real time.
We asked him to take us to the dark web to show us how easy it is to find stolen medical records.
Intake reports, history, examination, actual injuries, and diagnosis.
Turns out, we didn't have to go very far.
You don't even need to go anywhere near the dark web and you can get access to this.
It took him less than an hour.
Here we have life insurance. It says it's literally tagged U.S. only.
To find plenty.
Russian medical insurance, 123 records.
Even patient phone calls.
So now phone records are being wrapped up into data loss.
Sold online.
Sold online.
How much?
Yep. This person was actually giving it out for free. 160,000 people.
For free?
For free.
He says stolen medical records can sell anywhere from a few $100s to tens of thousands, depending on the number and detail on patients. While the government has done more to shut down the bad guys, he says healthcare companies need to step up security.
I feel like the organizations are still falling short on the technical side because every day, again, I see examples of, hey, I breached this website, I stole this database, I got into this area.
I go as far as my cord goes.
Leaving patients like Deborah relying on her doctors for more than just medicine.
That's scary. I'm going to definitely check into it when I go to the doctor.
She said that she wanted to lose 10 pounds.
Michael Lawn's mom.
She didn't have to lose the 10 pounds.
Cecil Carmichael's bride.
She wanted to get rid of the fat.
Of 46 years. They are family members still reeling from losing their loved ones to liposuction.
It was just a simple procedure, 3 hours, then you go home and go back to work in 3 or 4 days.
The second most common cosmetic procedure in the U.S., liposuction uses specialized equipment to suction out fat. And while the complication rate hovers around 5% nationwide, we've discovered this slimmed-down surgery is resulting in an uptick of deaths and injuries.
You said you don't know why this happened.
Including right here in Florida.
That's how these patients are dying.
Forcing warnings from the state's top doctors.
I am concerned about the significant number of deaths that we've seen at the board just this past year.
Carol Nadeau was 67 years old when she underwent liposuction at an outpatient clinic in Central Florida. Within a week, she was in the ER with a punctured colon, septic shock, and renal failure.
When I saw her for the first time in the hospital, I was pissed.
A few months later, after more ER visits, surgeries, and a stroke, Carol died. State discipline records and a malpractice suit blame the heart doctor who performed her liposuction.
I mean, he's a heart doctor. Why is he doing liposuction?
Turns out there's no law limiting licensed doctors from doing certain procedures, even if they're not trained or certified to do them.
State records also reveal Carol's doctor was board certified in internal medicine and cardiovascular medicine, but his training in liposuction, a 2-day proctorship.
When it comes to who is qualified to do procedures, the Board of Medicine unfortunately, has our hands tied.
Dr. Stephen Rosenberg leads the state board that disciplines Florida doctors who do wrong.
This patient had serious complications.
He said liposuction has become one of his top concerns.
I think you're seeing more and more individuals who are inadequately trained doing these procedures.
This year alone, the board has disciplined nearly a half dozen doctors for liposuctions that contributed to a patient injury or death.
Typically, they'll say they took a weekend course and had complications.
Have you been trained in the complications of liposuction?
Yes, sir, of course.
This Southwest Florida family doctor was recently fined nearly $25,000 and banned from all surgeries after a liposuction patient became infected. He says it was the result of the patient's own wound care. When asked about his liposuction training, he told us a few days at a Texas seminar.
But do you think that that's adequate to then do liposuction on patients?
It is minor, no anesthesia.
Here we have a case where the patient goes in for a cosmetic procedure and dies.
But we found even experienced doctors in lipo are getting it wrong.
That alone, I find disturbing.
This doctor told the board he had thousands of liposuctions under his belt before he punctured 63-year-old Rhonda Carmichael's bowels multiple times.
I just couldn't believe it.
She died less than 2 days later.
Doctor says she's gone.
How do you get into your abdominal cavity when you're doing liposuction?
Seated next to his attorney, the doctor didn't have an answer. But in this lawsuit, the family's lawyer said he should have known Rhonda, a diabetic with multiple health issues, was not a suitable candidate for the procedure. The doctor settled with the family and agreed to pay the state $30,000.
This past July, we would have been married 51 years.
Both families want the state to do more to protect patients from a popular cosmetic procedure in Florida and its dangerously ugly side.
People say, well, forgive and forget. I don't, and I haven't, and I can't.
Make a cube.
For Viviana and Jeremy Graham, life revolves around 4-year-old Tristan. But 4 months into their adventure as a family, this trio was torn apart.
Call 911, Tristan's having a seizure, and I see him holding Tristan. Tristan's, seizing.
Doctors determined Tristan had a brain bleed, and a child abuse pediatrician knew why. Physical abuse, specifically abusive head trauma, such as violent shaking injury, according to court records provided to us by the parents.
He was seen by so many different doctors before we took him again to the hospital the second time. So to us, we were like, what is going on?
Child abuse pediatricians are specially trained to spot child abuse. There are 22 in Florida who work as experts across the state. It's an industry where records are kept private to protect children. And while their opinions can save thousands of lives each year, court records now reveal they can also tear families apart when conclusions implicate parents who seem to have done everything right.
We sort of got ambushed, we felt like.
Once the state pediatrician called it abuse, Tristan was removed from home. Jeremy arrested for aggravated child abuse. A West Coast Florida firefighter and paramedic, his mug made headlines.
I didn't know if I was ever going to get him back.
The Grahams are among a small but vocal group of Florida parents.
It's like losing everything.
Now speaking out about a system they say doesn't always get it right.
So I said, we didn't do anything. She said, no, yes, you guys did. Wow.
Last summer, Vadim Kushner and his wife also found themselves on the defense after seeking help. A state child abuse pediatrician determined their newborn seizures were the result of shaken baby or blunt force trauma.
They took our kids.
The Kushners fought back, spending $30,000 on attorneys and experts who argued the baby's condition resulted from a complicated birth, not abuse. The judge agreed, criticizing the state's doctors for not knowing the month-old baby wasn't breathing at birth, the umbilical cord wrapped tightly around his neck. One admitted he never reviewed all the baby's medical records.
We do everything we can to make sure we make the appropriate diagnosis.
Dr. Suzanne Haney leads a National Pediatric Child Abuse Council. She's not involved in any of the Florida cases, but says these experts are extensively trained. Studies show they're less likely than other doctors to diagnose abuse.
Because we do understand all of the possible, mimics and other misdiagnoses that can happen.
She says abuse has to be diagnosed by a team, not just the expert who should know the child's full medical history and interview the parents directly.
The parents don't know why.
Attorney Jordan Abramowitz says that doesn't always happen.
The procedure of how they commence their cases is flawed.
Last year, he represented this young South Florida family, torn apart when the state pediatrician concluded abuse caused 22 fractures and bruises on their newborn.
All I can think of was
Grandma Nydia Ortiz.
This is a mistake. This is going to be corrected. It's not right.
The child's pediatric records were not reviewed before the termination was made. The parents were not interviewed. Their medical history wasn't taken.
Had that happen, Abramowitz claims they would have learned these parents spent weeks at doctor's offices over concerns about bruise marks. One even suspected the baby had a rare genetic disorder. Turns out she did.
In criminal trials, you're innocent until proven guilty, but child abuse cases, it felt like the burden fell on us. That was the most surprising.
8 months after the state removed Tristan from his parents, it dropped its case. Insufficient evidence.
I'll never forgive and forget.
I want her to remember that she didn't break us.
Every year, Viviana sends the state pediatrician a holiday card. 2 years ago, the doctor wrote back.
I try very hard to be thorough and get it right, but perhaps I need to be more careful to consider gray areas.
This is Nydia's son in May, moments after a judge ruled there was no child abuse and criticized the state's doctors for not interviewing the parents to assess their medical histories. This young family reunited immediately.
It was a nightmare.
It took 7 months and this grandmother's life savings.
$130,000.
How many cases are out there where the parents don't have money, didn't have the ability to get the right experts to see what's going on, and the parents lose their children?
Reliving it is unbearable.
These consumers,
they have me at gunpoint,
sharing the tales of renting a car,
Border Patrol agents, fully vested, fully armed,
then being accused of stealing it by the Florida-based rental giant Hertz.
I was in jail for about 15 to 16 hours.
7 hours I was detained there in that locked area.
Last year, this Ohio grandmother was detained at the Canadian border.
I'm terrified.
After she was accused of stealing a car she rented from a Hertz agent in Ohio. Turns out the car belonged to another rental company that reported it stolen a few days earlier.
They gave me a stolen car.
She hired an attorney. So has Magali Sterling, who says her 2017 rental from a Hertz in South Florida left this mother of one facing the barrel of multiple guns.
And I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, this car was reported stolen. And I'm like, what? I said, that's impossible because I rented this car.
Sterling ended up in jail. In her police report, she stated she did not return the vehicle despite the employee asking her. But Sterling tells us that's because Hertz agreed instead of returning the car Thursday, she could do it Monday.
After I got out of jail, I was told that there was a glitch in the system.
And now we're talking about 10, 20, 30 cases all over the country.
Her attorney, Francis Alexander, says Hertz's glitch has created a company pattern of wrongly reporting cars stolen, and customers, he says, pay the price.
The problem is that Hertz has broken computer systems. They have broken policies where rather than follow their standard operating procedures, and as a result, good people, good ordinary citizens are being thrown in jail.
But Hertz, which processes tens of millions of rentals each year, is driving home another point. False reports of stolen vehicles are extremely rare, a company spokesperson told us in this statement. When it has occurred, it has been the result of unique and extenuating circumstances. In the rare instance an error within our control has occurred, we take responsibility.
What can you do?
The bizarre incidents have consumer protection experts who love to give advice at a standstill.
You would find yourself in a difficult position. It sounds like the plot of a movie.
If that's the case, the end of Magali Sterling's movie is still in the works.
I've been fighting this case for about 2 years.
She pled not guilty to a third-degree felony for failing to return a rental car. In response, Hertz says filing a police report is a last resort and maintains it followed its overdue rental process.
Did you fail to return the car?
No, ma'am. I paid for the car and you guys reported it stolen while I'm driving it.
7 longest hours of my life.
Dina Johnson's movie is also still playing out in lawyer talks. 1 year after Hertz put this grandma behind the wheel of someone else's stolen car.
The humiliation, I'm just in shock.